All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Land of Chem. I am your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again. All right, everyone, welcome back. This is episode 68, the chemical analysis of the red pyramid staining part 3. And in today's episode, I will finally be presenting the remaining results of chemical analysis from more than 20 different samples that were taken by the Acida project of the staining found inside the chambers of the red pyramid of Dashur that are documented with pictures from each sample location so you can see exactly what the material looks like at each site. I will also be discussing my conversation with a professional geologist regarding the results of this chemical analysis and explaining some of the deficiencies in traditional academia when interpreting contradictory evidence, such as the vertical erosion patterns found around the Sphinx enclosure. Ladies and gentlemen, this is by far the most comprehensive assessment that I have ever attempted regarding the chemical analysis of the red pyramid staining, and the data never ceases to amaze me with several fascinating discoveries that I will also be revealing today. So thank you once again to the Acida project for trusting me with this material, and I will put links to their YouTube channel and website in the video description below. Next up, I have two amazing podcast appearances that are now available. First, my third appearance on the Expanding Reality podcast with my buddy Brandon Thomas. This time, we don't talk about pyramids at all. The conversation is exclusively about Freemasonry. So if you're interested in learning some truth about the fraternity, I highly recommend you check out that episode. Next, on the 13 podcast with my buddy Ryan Cook. This is typically a musical performer-based podcast, but I was his first non-performer guest, and we talked about everything from skateboarding to my experience in the EDM DJ scene with my past life as bodyguard, aka DJ Three Cats, and of course, I give an awesome presentation on the function of the Egyptian pyramids, including some amazing discoveries that were made during my most recent 2022 research expedition. So I will put links to both of those podcast appearances in the video description below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button so that you do not miss the new videos when they premiere every single week. If you want to help support the channel, just go to thelandofchem.com. You can pick up a limited first edition print copy of the book, grab yourself some Land of Chem merch. Either way, all the orders mean the world to me. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is @thelandofchem. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it for today's intro. So without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, everyone, here we go with tonight's episode. So first and foremost, let me start by explaining the mystery of the missing calcium in these samples, which I mentioned in both of the previous episodes was one of the main questions I had regarding these chemical analyses. And it turns out my contact at the Acida project just didn't have all the data, but she did put me in touch with the gentleman that does, who is the guy that actually ran some of these tests. Secondly, the samples were run using several quite different types of analytical technology, which are all designed for specific purposes. So now I have the full picture, putting together these three separate pieces. So here we have an XRF analysis done of limestone samples from the US from several different publications, showing that limestone is mostly composed of calcium oxides in the 60% range and carbon dioxide in the 40% range, and both of these in the form of calcium carbonate in the 80 to 90% range, along with some non-metal oxides like silicon and sulfur, potassium oxides, and some metal oxides like iron and aluminum oxide in much smaller quantities, 10% and less. And I immediately noticed that the calcium was completely missing from the previous data. So finally, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, another XRF analysis that shows the calcium carbonate concentration in these samples, here and here, along with silicon dioxide, metal oxides, etc., all in the normal range. And the Acida project only had a limited amount of these samples, so each different lab got different material, and across the board, they all yielded different results. And this has been a very complicated process getting all of this together, but now we have solved the mystery of the missing calcium, which I knew had to be somewhere in these samples. And this brings me directly to the next step, which is that XRF X-ray fluorescence analysis does not detect trace elements. However, the following results were obtained using the Perkins-Elmer ICP-MS Elon DRC2, an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer and method for performing measurements of metal content in solid objects. And this method is specifically used to detect trace metals and will not show elements that are in high concentration, which again explains why calcium is missing from the next group of results. And this is an ICP-MS, an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer. And as I mentioned before, this type of analysis does not provide the non-metal content like carbon or the silicon and sulfur that we saw in the composition of the red pyramid paint compound. However, it does give us some very unusual insights into the composition of this material. And here is a full list of the locations with corresponding picture numbers and a description of the site and sample appearance that I will be referencing as we move forward. And this is the full list of almost 40 different metallic elements that were discovered in each of these samples. And I know there is absolutely no way to absorb all of the information in this table, so I will discuss the content of each sample as we take a look at the pictures. All right, first sample, number 41, described as block with a red coating on the third upper chamber, the material of the red substance of the block, north wall. And keep in mind, I am reading verbatim the descriptions given by this Russian team, so just be patient with their English. So this, and the majority of the samples are from the pit in the third chamber. And keep in mind, this area was never exposed when the structure was originally built. There was a floor of some type covering this pit, and it was excavated by quote-unquote tomb raiders. So here, we are looking at the composition of the staining on the core masonry, not of the walls of the chambers. And this is an important point, as you will see moving forward. So the composition of this sample is as follows, as reported in grams per ton and rounded to the nearest whole number. Beryllium, 1 gram. Scandium, 6 grams. Vanadium, 50 grams. Chromium, 47 grams. Manganese, 274 grams. Iron, 21,196 grams. Cobalt, 10 grams. Nickel, 16 grams. Copper, 10 grams. Zinc, 59 grams. Gallium, 10 grams. Rubidium, 28 grams. Strontium, 386 grams. Yttrium, 13 grams. Zirconium, 70 grams. Niobium, 11 grams. Molybdenum, 1 gram. Tin, 1 gram. Cesium, 1 gram. Barium, 274 grams. Lanthanum, 19 grams. Cerium, 42 grams. Praseodymium, 5 grams. Neodymium, 19 grams. Samarium, 4 grams. Europium, 1 gram. Gadolinium, 4 grams. Terbium, 1 gram. Dysprosium, 3 grams. Holmium, 1 gram. Erbium, 1 gram. Ytterbium, 1 gram. Hafnium, 2 grams. Lead, 9 grams, thorium, 5 grams, and uranium, 2 grams. So you can see that this is quite a long list of metallic trace elements, and I will explain several things that will apply generally as we move forward. First, all of these samples contain a high content of iron, which undoubtedly comes in the form of the reddish-brown iron oxide that you can see here and in some of the later pictures, and should come as no surprise, as the stones that were used to build the red pyramid have always been noted for their reddish color due to iron content. So here, the quantity is approximately 46 pounds of the 2,000 in 1 ton. There is also strontium, as mentioned in the previous episodes, about 1 pound per ton, and barium in similar concentrations. There is also manganese, about 1 pound per ton, and the rest are all in such minuscule concentrations that they can be completely disregarded as background trace elements, as I have mentioned. So what we're looking at here, and in most of the following samples, is predominantly calcium oxides with trace amounts of iron, strontium, barium, manganese oxides, all of which fall into the normal expected ranges. Next up, we have another sample from the north wall of the pit in the third chamber, with triple the iron oxide content of the previous site. No surprise here from the appearance of this location. And another sample from the western wall of the pit, and the iron oxide content drops significantly in all of the remaining samples from 62,000 grams per ton to less than 10,000 per ton in each sample. And the same content was found here in this wall. This extrusion is found in the third chamber with the exact same profile, surprisingly low iron content given the color, but the color could also be caused by the strontium oxide, which is a black colored oxide, and you will see more of this color specifically in just a moment. This one is described as point of flow above the removed block in the pit, and it looks like a lot of these samples were taken from around this area, which is exposed core masonry of the structure, which you can see here. And you will begin to notice that if you look at these extrusions closely, there are many, many layers of them, and this will be relevant again shortly. And surprisingly, this spot has very little iron content, only about 3,000 grams per ton, compared to the highest concentration in these samples, about 62,000 grams per ton. Next of note is this one from inside of that excavated block area in the pit in the third chamber. And here we had the second to lowest iron content of all the samples, only about 1,800 grams per ton, and the highest strontium content, over 2,000 grams per ton, which is evidence of the unique strontium carbonate limestone that I have proposed in previous episodes. But now we know why there was no calcium on this entire list, because the concentration is too high to be detected by the ICP-MS method, and calcium is definitely a part of this core limestone. And the next 5 samples were all taken from around the pit, showing similar content to all of the previous samples, with lower iron oxide content and higher strontium content. And you can see right here another area of the pit where samples were taken, but it does not appear that any samples in this batch were actually taken from the walls of the chamber, which is the area that I am specifically interested in. All right, now, here's where things start to get very interesting. This hole in the upper vault of the second chamber and the black material extruding out that you can see here, which has the lowest iron oxide content, 1,600 grams per ton, but the highest zinc concentration, 163 grams per ton, and the highest lead concentration at 39 grams per ton. The lead should now have your attention, as it was also found in the analysis of the metallic coating compound discovered covering the containers inside the Osiris shaft, and the lead is virtually non-existent in all of the core masonry samples. Also, the zinc is anywhere from 3 to 20 times higher concentration on the surface of the chamber walls as compared to the core masonry, both of which are evidence of the metallic sealing compound that I have proposed in previous episodes, composed of iron, copper, zinc, antimony, and thorium. However, lead was completely absent from the data that I had received previously that I will be showing in just a moment, which might be just an indication that there were different metallic compounds used in each of the 3 chambers. And the last several samples were taken from the ceiling of the north and a few from the connecting passage leading from the upper second chamber into the third chamber, again, which you can see here, another one here, another sample from the connecting passage leading into the third chamber, and the final sample taken from the ceiling of the northern pump shaft, all showing the same lower iron oxide and higher strontium, relatively speaking, in comparison to the rest of the samples. And you will notice that none of these samples came from the walls of any of the 3 reaction chambers. We just had samples from the pit, the northern pump shaft, the connecting shaft between the second and third chambers, and that hole in the second upper chamber, which had the highest zinc and lead concentrations, which was relatively close to the surface, depending on exactly where they took the sample material. Which brings me to this. the original sample analysis that was sent to me by the ACITA project that was discussed in part 1, that was taken from one of the chamber walls and assessed using a completely different type of machine than the previous XRF and ICP-MS analysis. This time, the analysis was taken using an electron microscope, showing almost a complete absence of calcium, or extremely low levels of calcium, which you can see here. And it shows some of the non-metal content that we were discussing before. And some sodium here at 30%, which was also completely absent from the XRF and the ICP-MS data. But then we have 50% copper in this sample, 89% zinc in this sample, 57% iron, 49% antimony, and the whopping 36% thorium, which were only detected using the analytic electron microscope and found exclusively on the surface of the chamber walls, as explained in part 2. And then we are back to the first ICP-MS data that was taken from another different sample, which once again rejected the iron and calcium content due to their high concentrations, but it does show the 405 grams per ton of the strontium that was explained in part 1. All right, everyone, just a quick reminder that if you want to help support the channel, just go to thelandofchem.com. You can pick up some Land of Chem merch. I have new hoodies, long sleeve shirts, the original Land of Chem t-shirts with both logos, the new 5th degree logo designed by yours truly, and I just put up a brand new t-shirt, the black on black new 5th degree logo on the black t-shirt, absolutely fire. And of course, limited first edition print copies of the book, The Land of Chem, an initiation into ancient chemistry through the degrees of the Egyptian pyramids. So if you want to help support the channel, just go to the website. You can grab some merch, pick up a copy of the book. Either way, all the orders mean more to me than words can possibly ever describe. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And last but not least, I gave this data to a professional geologist to get some feedback from somebody who actually works in the field. And this was his response, quote, "The chambers of the pyramids were typically lined with some sort of granite, and the exterior blocks were limestone. The granite would explain the trace radioactive elements, period," end quote. And that was the end of our discussion, as he refused to further analyze or discuss the samples. And this, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the biggest deficiency in traditional academia, which is that anything that is outside the narrative that they were indoctrinated into during school is compartmentalized and completely rejected. They are utterly incapable of processing anything that is outside the scope of their academic knowledge, and they in turn imply the fault of the messenger. In this case, this dumbass suggesting that I don't know the difference between limestone and granite, and that the inside of the red pyramid was cased in red granite. Well, that could not be farther from the truth, as the red pyramid is completely made of limestone, not one single piece of red granite. But again, my data was rejected because this guy knows better than I do, and there's no way in his mind that these samples could be from limestone. And this is the exact same case that is being made against Dr. Robert Schoch in his dating of the erosion around the Sphinx enclosure, which has been completely rejected by academia because it is contradictory to the pigeonholed narrative that they were fed in college, and he has been completely ostracized from the academic community for attempting to explain evidence that is clear as day, like the vertical water erosion patterns around the Sphinx enclosure. And of course, this quote-unquote professional geologist's brain couldn't possibly comprehend all of this data. But after an exhaustively laborious process, I have presented you with a conclusive explanation of exactly what this material is. And these extrusions were caused due to the extremely high temperature and pressure fluctuations inside of these chambers. This metal content had to be heated to a temperature high enough that it liquefied, and the pressure changed drastically enough inside of these chambers to squeeze the material out of the stone. And the sad thing is that academics will tell you that all of this staining is from bats. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. This was episode 68. the chemical analysis of the Red Pyramid staining part 3, and holy shit, that was a lot of work, so I really hope you enjoyed today's video. In the next episode in the series, we will be jumping into some brand new material with an explanation of the configuration of the Pyramid of Winis in preparation for the revelation of how that structure operated. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to The Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button so that you do not miss the new videos when they premiere every single week. If you want to help support the channel, just go to thelandofchem.com. You can pick up a limited first edition print copy of the book, grab yourself some Land of Chem merch. Either way, all the orders mean the world to me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is @thelandofchem. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it for today's video. So I will see you next time. Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to The Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.